We'd like to thank the following sponsors for helping provide this video.
Davi, he will introduce himself because he knows a lot more about himself than I do, talking on Agile portfolio management.
Great. So good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
So a lot of hands went up when people were asked who's practicing Agile. I want to get a little more specific than that. So by show of hands, who's practicing Agile at the team level, at a Scrum team level? Okay, now how many of you are practicing it at a program level, a Scrum of Scrums level? All right, how many of you are practicing at a portfolio level, a corporate level? All right, everyone who's got their hands up right now, come on up here because you could probably do this talk better than me. I've only done it at the portfolio level once. We're doing it right now in my current company, Cinecore, which is what I'm going to talk about in terms of the presentation and how we're doing it. Because it's hard, right? I mean, Agile adoption at the Scrum team level is hard in and of itself. And then trying to get all those Scrum teams coordinated in multiple work streams to then be a Scrum of Scrums is hard. Trying to do it at the portfolio level across your entire enterprise is even harder. And one of the reasons why it's even harder is because your Scrum teams and your executives are talking two different languages, right? Your executives want to have transparency and predictability in terms of what's going on. Your Scrum teams are talking about stuff completely differently. And so what I want to talk about today is this chasm that it creates between those two sets of groups and how you can actually cross that chasm. So you know, I've had the benefit in terms of I've been the person in a couple organizations that has driven Agile adoption at the Scrum team level, but I'm also an executive. So I've kind of been the guy stretched across this chasm every now and again, and I've figured out ways in which to bridge it with different tools and stuff like that. So that's what I'm going to talk about tonight. I'm a firm believer in I am not the smartest person in the room, so I'm sure there are other people in the room that are smarter than me, so I like these sessions to be interactive and people ask questions, and there's actually going to be an exercise that we're going to do that I'm going to talk about in a minute just to get you all involved. So this is definitely a participation exercise in terms of don't think you're just going to sit there and listen to me for the next hour. So my background. I've been doing Agile since 2006. Started doing it at that point in time for various reasons, some of which are described in Ken Swaber's book about software in 30 days, which you can read about the horrific experience I was going through at the beginning of the chapter, and then talk about how Agile saved us at the end of the chapter. And so, as I said, we've been practicing it at multiple levels within the organization. I originally did the transformation to Agile at SeaChange, which is a TV VOD company. If you guys have watched VOD on your TV, you have probably used their system and just don't know it because it was white labeled to cable operators to use it. We were able to get it running at the team level and at the Scrum of Scrums level, the program level. We never got it to the portfolio level. At Cinecore, I've done the same thing. Agile adoption there. I'm going to go into more detail in terms of what Cinecore does and our products and some of the transformation steps that we've made. But we actually are running it at the portfolio level right now. And I want to talk about some of the things that we've done to overcome it at the portfolio level. I mentioned you can read about my horrific experiences with before Agile at SeaChange in Ken's book. I also have done a couple talks about executives and their involvement in Agile because I think it really is important for the executives to be behind what is going on from an Agile perspective. Too many organizations that I talk to view Agile as a development activity. Oh, that's what the engineering group does. But Agile is something the entire organization needs to do, and so it's important that we make sure people understand that. And so I gave that talk to Agile New England a couple of years ago, and you can watch it on YouTube and other places. Now, as I said, one of the things I like to do is make this very interactive. So I'm going to try something. How many people here have a Twitter account and have a device that they can have access to Twitter right now? All right, that's pretty good. Okay, so write this down. @SteveDavy14. That's my Twitter handle. We're going to get to a point where we have an exercise going, and I'm going to ask you guys to tweet at me in terms of your information. We'll use that as a way of getting interactive, as well as people raising their hands in terms of providing input later on. So when we look at Agile, There's a couple slides that you'll see are pretty common between this presentation and any other presentation I give on Agile, and this is one of them. Because I really like this slide. It really helps focus in on the different aspects that people have related to Agile. How your Agile teams are down here worrying about this level of stuff. But your executives are up here worrying about the strategy, worrying about the transparency, and all of that, and you know, KPIs and different things that you normally wouldn't be talking about on a regular basis within your Scrum teams. And so because these different circles have different areas of focus, you have to really take that into account as you're looking at adapting Agile, otherwise you start creating issues. And so what are some of the issues that we have? Well, the good thing is, I always like starting with what do we have in common before we start talking about what do we have different. And so what do executives and Agile teams have in common? Well, they both are in agreement that they want to deliver stuff faster, right? That's the whole idea behind Agile. Do it with a lean methodology, look at MVP, deliver stuff in sprints and get it working and get it out there quicker, and Agile teams focus on that, and executives love that, love the fact that they can get products out sooner. We also love the fact that we can lower costs to some degree, right? I mean, Agile isn't the perfect way in terms of lowering costs, but the idea is that you fail sooner, which helps you not invest so much in something that might not be working for you, and you can adjust. And so in essence, it's helping to lower your costs. And then the big thing is it helps you to increase your quality. You're constantly focusing on working software that you're delivering, and so there's a constant focus on quality. You know, I've been doing software for 30 years now, and I lived all the lives of where you got to the end of the project and all the features were coded, and then you spent the next 3 months fixing all the bugs before you had it delivered, right? And Agile helps you avoid that, and again, executives love that. That's about all you have in common, though, between Agile teams and executives. Then you start having the differences. So as an executive, what do you worry about? You worry about how much money am I spending on each of my projects? Am I getting a return on investment of what I'm building? This amount of money I'm pumping into these teams, am I getting an adequate return out of that? And how efficiently are my teams running? Are they really clicking on all cylinders, or are there issues that I need to worry about? Executives worry about timelines, right? Because what are they doing? They're out there talking to customers, they're out there talking to partners, they're out there talking to board members, other executives, and they're talking about how do we align things and when are things going to be done. So they really are focused on timelines. And then they're very much focused on high-level requirements, right? They care about, here's the high-level benefit that we're delivering, competitive differentiation that we're delivering. They're worrying about it at a very high level. Your Agile teams now are talking completely different language. Right, they're talking about sprints and what are we doing in this sprint in terms of what user stories are we tackling, how many story points is it going to take for each of those user stories. They're keeping track of their velocity, and then in their retrospectives, looking at whether their velocity is increasing or decreasing. They're experimenting in terms of trying to figure out ways to affect that and change that and make it better. They're talking about MVP releases and trying to really narrow features down into their minimum set. And so these. It's a completely different language, a completely different focus. And so the problem becomes that you start creating this chasm between the two groups. And then even worse, executives are looking at what are we doing? They're looking at it at 6 to 12 month horizons in terms of how far out they're going. And they're trying to figure out how do we meet our business needs, right? How do we survive as a business? How do we differentiate ourselves as a business? Are we really doing what we need to do? Your Agile teams are focusing on how do we do this, how do we actually deliver this and make it happen. They're looking at stuff in sprint increments. If they're a really good Scrum team, then they're looking at releases, so they're looking at multiple sprint increments, but probably no further than 3 to 6 months in terms of their visibility. And they're looking at ways in which they can respond quickly, right? The old saying of they want to be able to accept change, right? They accept change happening on a regular basis. And so again, there's this differentiation that happens between these two, and you need to figure out how you can bring the two parts of your organization together. And it's critical that you bring them together, right? Otherwise, you're just going to have chaos, right? You're going to be operating in a nice agile fashion within your teams, and your executives are going to be up here and not know what's going on, not knowing how they can support the teams or help them. The teams are going to be trying to figure out what are we doing that is really helping the company. If I do this, are we really going to win? Are we gonna increase our revenue? Are we gonna increase our stock price? Are we gonna survive as a startup? Whatever it is, there's that disconnect that ends up happening. So you have to figure out a way of crossing the chasm between these two, right? And you make sure that your organization is aligned from top to bottom on everything you've got going on and all the activities that you have going on. And you want to do that in a way where you're not slowing down your pace of delivery or your pace of innovation. And you want to also do it in a way where you're preserving the autonomy that you're giving to your Scrum teams in order to operate at the level that they've been operating at. And so what I want to do for the rest of the presentation is kind of talk about the 6 areas that we focused on within Synacor to make this happen, to align the executives and the Agile teams. And so we're going to be focusing on alignment, efficiency, feeling of purpose, resource planning, visibility and forecast. We're going to go into each of those areas, talk about what I mean by those, give examples about what we're doing at Synacor in those areas. But then your participation is, I want you to be contributing what your organizations are doing in those areas to help out. Yes, question?
How do you compare the Chasm if the organization has 5 people in it, or 50, or 500? Is it an easier thing in a 5-person organization? Is it severely difficult in a 500, or is it simply different?
So I think, so the question is does the Chasm change in terms of the size of the organization, right? Is it easier, is it wider? Clearly, the difference exists no matter what size company you have. The difference with a 5-person organization is that there's that constant communication that's going on. So you can constantly be sharing information about how are we staying in alignment, why are we doing this, in terms of feeling a purpose, making sure that you're planning and you understand what's going on. So the smaller the company is, the easier it is to make sure you're following these 6 steps to keep everything aligned. The bigger you get, the harder it becomes. And so Synacor, we're a 270-person organization, so we're what I would consider a small company, right? We're not a startup, but we're not a huge company like an Oracle or an EMC or a Google or anything like that, right? But pretty small size. We're split, and I'll go into more detail in terms of the size of the engineering organization and all of that. But we needed to do these things because that gap was getting pretty big between what was going on at the executive level and what was going on at the Agile level. So smaller, easier to do this. You can have more constant communication happening with that. The bigger you get, the more you need to start thinking about it and thinking about what tools you want to put in place to help with that. Is there a question?
My experience has been that the gap is less significant in companies that develop products that are product-oriented, or where technology plays a more direct role in leveraging their business. In other companies where they're doing operational excellence or something like that, and there's a more indirect relationship between a development effort and their business goals, the gap has been much greater. And that's would you agree with that? Is that?
Yeah, definitely, right? I mean, so my experience has been within development organizations, so I can speak about that. But in terms of people that I've talked to at Agile conferences and other meetings, yeah, I think when it's not as clear as we're building this product for this reason, and that's commonly known throughout the company, then it becomes even harder, right, to cross this chasm. And the key thing I want to point out in terms of the way I drew this, if you notice, the way I drew this is a bridge that gaps these two, but I put a person on the bridge. And the reason I put a person on the bridge is because in some organizations, and definitely within ours, we needed someone to focus on this and actually make this happen and make this a reality. So don't think that you can implement some of these practices without putting somebody in charge of this and making sure that it's going to happen. Otherwise, I think you just end up, you might close the gap a little bit, but I don't think you're really going to bridge it. Any other questions before I get into the 6 areas? Well, actually, before I do that, I want to talk about Synacor a little bit. So Synacor, this is our mission statement. You guys can read it. I'm not going to read it, but basically, if you look at us as an organization, We deliver end-to-end products that enable people to get access to their entertainment, whether it's news, videos, short-form videos, TV shows, movies, email, whatever. We do that through browser-based app as well as native mobile apps. And so we have front-end experiences that touch on those 4 areas of news, video, email, and then mobile apps. We have back-end teams that focus on authentication, metadata management, personalization, advertising, because that's how we make all of our money. And the engineering organization has about 15 Scrum teams that are running at any given time related to the delivery of our products across the roughly 100 people within the engineering organization, between software and QA people. And we're split across 5 geographical locations. So even though we're small, we're split across a lot of geographical locations because we've done 3 acquisitions. We use Atlassian tools, so you're going to hear me talk about things like Jira and what we're doing with Jira and Jira for Agile. But we do have other tools that we bring in to help us do portfolio management. Asana is one of those that I'll talk about. And basically, we started our Agile journey when I started with the company, which was just about 2.5 years ago. And we spent the first 6 to 9 months just getting our Agile teams working well, and just making sure that they had it down in terms of putting in user stories, prioritizing them, doing demos, getting working software, retrospectives, actually making improvements, stuff like that. And then we spent another 6 months getting it to work at the program level in terms of the Scrum level, and bring multiple Scrum teams together and work streams together and work well. And then we spent 6 months getting everything to work at the portfolio level. And so that's what I'm going to really focus on is what we did at the portfolio level in those 6 months. We are now on our journey of continuous delivery. So being able to actually take our software and deliver it on a regular basis, as well as adopting a lean methodology as well too. So we've got probably another year in terms of delivery of both of those in terms of continuous delivery and lean methodology as well too. And then this is just an example. You probably you've never heard of Synacor because we white label our products. So if you're a Verizon customer, if you're a Charter customer, what else do we have in this area? Verizon, Charter, too big. No, we're not Comcast, unfortunately. Yeah, sorry. Comcast, everything that we have built, Comcast has built themselves. Our main competitor tends to be the cable operators and telcos building their own technology. But if you go to like entertainment.verizon.net or charter.net, that's our product that's allowing you to get access to your email, to your videos, TV shows, movies, TV everywhere type applications. All right, so number one, first thing is alignment, right? You need to have your ducks in the row. And basically the way we do that is we track priorities across all of our projects. So every project that we have, that we are working on, goes into what we call our intake process. And our intake process allows us to prioritize it, but also make sure we filter the work as well too. So the intake process the project will come into the intake process with things like what's the expected revenue, what's the cost associated with the project, what's the customer importance, is there a strategic importance to it that's going to create stickiness, does it fit with our core competencies? There's a whole bunch of variables that go into that. And those variables will change from organization to organization, project to project, whatever you're working on. And then out of that spits this magic number. And this magic number is how we prioritize stuff across the entire company. And then the executives look at these and decide whether they're going to approve it or not. So what this allows is that everyone's in alignment now in terms of what are the most important things as a company we should be focusing on. And every week we look at our top 10 projects and see what we're doing. That's what the executives focus on a weekly basis. And everything beyond that, the other 160 other projects we got going on within the company, we don't focus on as much, but at least everyone's in alignment in terms of what's most important. So then as you start talking across groups, the priority decisions are easy. They're done already for you, right? So if you need to trade off resources, trade off work that someone's doing, it becomes a lot easier. So you've got that alignment. And then we can also make sure as an executive level that our resources are focused on the right projects, right? If these are our top 10 and we don't have resources to be successful in those top 10, then we need to start taking them from other projects in order to make these successful. It also prevents road work from getting to the teams, right? So you can't have someone go talk, hey, Bill, can you work on this for me and get this done? Everything has to go through here. And so we end up creating that filter, right? If something doesn't get a green light from the executive teams, then the teams are told, don't work on it. And the way that this works is we have a project that goes into this tool called Asana, which the executive teams then look at and approve, and then that from there creates an epic within Jira that the teams can then start breaking down and focusing on moving forward. And we'll talk about the breakdown of that later in terms of other things that we need to do.
Do you ever have a problem with road work sneaking into teams by people making an argument that it's part of one of your top 10, even though that's a questionable argument?
All the time. People try to sneak stuff into the system on a constant basis. And so really what we had to do was make sure that we empowered the Scrum teams with being able to say, this isn't attached to the epic that was approved by the executives, and hence we're not going to work on it. Now if the epic breaks down into a bunch of other work, then it becomes a judgment call in terms of whether the team really thinks someone's trying to sneak something in, or whether it really is a legitimate breakdown of that epic into work that needs to happen. So there is autonomy that we give the teams, right, as part of being, passing judgment on, is this something someone's trying to sneak in, or is this really legitimately associated with the project that was approved by the executives? And then part of that is going to be, we also keep, I'll talk about this later, we keep track of costs. We keep track of the cost of the projects versus the projection, and the revenue that the project generated versus the projection as well too. And so if you start inflating what needs to be done, your costs are going to go up, and so that starts ending up causing issues with why was it so far off?
Sorry.
I just have one question. An epic does not equal an epic does not equal an epic. So when you talk about your executives working at the epic level, and then that generates an epic into Jira, how large are those typically? Some of the teams I worked with, the epics are like 50 story points. Some of them are 500.
Yeah, so we use 3 tiers of breakdown, right? So we have epics, then features, and then user stories. And even user stories sometimes break down into work items. And so an epic for us is a really big item. It's something like, you are going to do integration. You're going to create a recommendation engine, right? And so that could be something that is, however you gauge your story points. That could be 500 to 1,000 story points. And then it'll break down into features, which will then break down into user stories. So epics is a very high level for us.
You mentioned tracking both costs and revenue. It's fairly clear to me how you could hold development teams accountable for costs, how much time they spent on things. I'm interested in understanding who you hold, and how you hold them accountable for revenue.
So the product owner, because the product owner is the one that's providing the projected revenue, and yeah, it becomes a little squishy because there's an association there, right? And great other talk to talk about, right? Is the triad between engineering, product owners, and salespeople, right? And they all need to be in lockstep in order to be successful, from my experiences, from what I've seen. And in some cases, as we're looking at these revenue numbers, when we're approving it, when the executives are approving the intake projects, it is the 3 of us. It's the head. It's myself as the head of engineering. It's the head of sales. It's the head of product management that are looking at these, and we're looking at not only what's being asked in terms of the work, but we're looking at the cost, and we're looking at the revenue to see, do we all think this is pretty legitimate? Because we've had projects that have come in where someone said, oh yeah, this is going to generate $50 million of revenue, and there's no cost. And so that's a no-brainer to understand that that's wrong and that's crap. But there's other ones where you have to dig into it a little bit to really understand, do we really think we're going to generate that amount of revenue?
And if the revenue projections are not met, what do you do to hold somebody accountable for that?
Yeah, so this becomes it becomes a management exercise and issue, right? Of you know, did the person just make a mistake once? Are they chronically making mistakes here, right? I mean, it becomes a management opportunity or a management challenge, whichever way you want to phrase it. But I mean, basically, what that means is that someone doesn't have a good grasp on their business, and as a product owner, that's not a good thing, right? You want your product owners to have a good grasp of their business.
How frequently do you do your project reviews?
Every week. Every week we get together because, you know, in some weeks we're looking at no items, one item maybe. Other weeks we're looking at a lot, right, depending on how much has gotten spun up and coming in at any point in time. And because our work ranges from major project deliveries, which could take, you know, several sprints, maybe like, you know, 2 months worth of sprints, or it could be something that is going to get done this week. It varies, right, in terms of what's coming in. And we'll also talk about resource planning, because that, you know, looking at the intake helps us kind of understand capacity of the system as well too, and when we should be pushing back on stuff. A lot of this is, you're going to hear me talk about intake and what we do there, because it's tied to a lot of the other things that we're doing as well too. Question in the back?
Yeah, can you say a little bit more about matching the resource capacity to the initiatives? Because I heard a whole lot of prioritization based on what's important for business, but if you don't match it to the capacity of the system.
That's right. So I'll talk about that. Can I put a pin in that and come back to that when I talk about resource planning and what we need to be doing there? Okay, so then real quick, right, you know, I've kind of said this already, but basically, so just so you know, everything that I'm showing you in terms of the Cinecore stuff is all legitimate. These are legitimate screenshots of our systems and data. I tried to pick stuff that was 6 months old, so hopefully I'm not giving away any competitive advantages or any other information and stuff, but this is all real data from our systems. And as you can see, these are the different things that we keep track of. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that goes out to the right there that I didn't include. But you know, a number comes out that helps us understand how things are ranked across the entire company. So now your turn. So you can raise your hand or you can tweet at me, but basically tell me, how do you do alignment in your company? What are the things that you do in terms of ensuring that you have alignment across your company?
What's your tweet handle again?
SDB14. Anyone want to just shout out and contribute, or everybody? I was just going to read off the tweets, but if people want to shout out as well too, that's fine too. So for those of you that were doing Agile at the portfolio level earlier, that all had your hands up, there was about a dozen of you that had your hands up. How are you doing it?
So we get a bunch of people in the room from different divisions, and they all think that their work is number one. They all fight it out, and the last person who comes out of the room wins. It's been very difficult because everyone, you know, we tried the voting, and everyone votes for their own thing, saying ours is number one. We need to get this done, and the next person says no, we need to get this done. So it used to be done on an annual basis. So we do it once a year, get all these people together, and slowly but surely we're getting more into, we've done it semi-annually, and then we're going to try and go to a quarterly. So try and have a conversation a lot more frequently than what they were doing in the past.
And when you have that argument of mine's number one, no, mine's number one, how do you resolve that?
You go to the numbers, like you were
Okay.
saying,
Yep.
you try and focus on value and return on investment. So there's a lot of numbers being thrown around, and you know, some people like to fudge the data every now and then, but
Yeah.
you know, that's where it comes down to.
Yeah, you do
Where are
have
you
to.
going to get your revenue from?
You have to, right, you have to watch the number fudging as well too. People game the system, especially developers is what I found. They just love to figure out these loopholes of how to get around stuff. It's crazy. Yeah.
Well, in our case, it's thousands and thousands of people in the company, so it's a very big, large company. And they do it once a year. They spend about 3-4 months figuring out the business benefits, and then they try to size it and associate the cost, and then they prioritize it based on return on investment. And unfortunately, it's a journey, so we're not there yet. those decisions. So, working on that.
Yeah, it is a journey, definitely, is what I've found, right? And even for us, it's been a journey of understanding what tools to use and frequency and what's working, what's not working, who's gaming the system, who's not, and yeah, which is what I love, right? Constant improvement, that's my favorite part of
Culture
Agile.
change, constant improvement, you need it.
Great. Great, well, I'm Kanban pulled based portfolio, that sounds interesting. So, David tweeted that at me. David, can you explain that a little bit more?
Basically, I'm getting into too much detail. The major projects are kept in a corporate repository, and execs get together and look at the cost of delay and put them in a ready state. And when teams have capacity, they pull projects off of that list.
Yeah, great, excellent, cool. All right, I'm also getting Bruin scores as I'm educated as interested, and I am a big fan, so Bruin. All right, so let's move along, but I'd love to hear other ideas about alignment later on afterwards that you have on that. So let's talk about the next thing, right, about efficiency. So, you've got this prioritized issue, or these prioritized projects in terms of the intake stuff. Now what you need to make sure is that you're creating a good prioritized backlog. That's part of good Agile development. And then making sure that your teams are then putting in good qualified backlog epics and user stories and all of that from there on. But part of this is that what you really want to make sure is that when work is getting to your teams, it's well defined, and you really know when you're ready to move the work to the teams. And so we do that using a 3C methodology, the card, the conversation, and the confirmation. And so basically, when the work is coming into the intake process, that's the card, right? That's like, if someone wrote something on a sticky note, basically, and stuck it up on the wall, that's the high-level thing. It's pretty, there's no details associated with that. It just gives us an idea of the rough project. We'll then put the rough size against that, right? Engineering will take a big swag, usually an order to magnitude of extra large, medium, small, extra small type project. And that's what we'll use in terms of going into the intake process. But that isn't enough to be able to say the work is now ready to give to the team. So now that card has been sized, it goes to the intake, gets prioritized, we now are ready to start giving it to a team to do the work. When we go to give it to the team to do the work, that's when the conversation happens. That's when you start getting to that next level of getting those features detailed out, and the interaction is happening between your product owner and your scrum teams, your tech leads, however you do that, to talk more about what's going on. And that's going to give you a better idea of what does this really mean, what is it going to take, and then once that conversation happens, is when you can actually start moving the work to the team, so that the team doesn't start sizing something until they have had that conversation and now start having features broken down for them to understand what they need to work on. And then confirmation, for those of you that are from the testing background and the QA background, is all about making sure you've got the right acceptance criteria associated with that. So again, the idea is you're breaking it down to the point where it's coming to the team, and now the team understands what it's going to take to build this and what it's going to take to test it, to make sure that you're not introducing this whole effort on the team of trying to refine this. So we added this because of something that we discovered, right? We did an experiment of we tracked the time of what our engineers were working on over a 2-week period, make sure that we covered all of our teams and got some part of their sprints in there, and asked them to categorize their time. And what we found was interesting, right? The intent was to make sure that they were spending, our developers and QA people were spending at least 80% of the job doing development or testing, right? Actually doing what we're paying them to do. What we found was that we had several teams where they were spending a large amount of their time understanding requirements. Because what was happening is the user stories were coming in and they weren't well defined. And so that's when we started instituting this conversation that needed to happen before work moved to that. And then the other thing that we wanted to make sure as well too, is that we didn't provide any customer commitments until the work had been scoped and prioritized, so that we understood now where was it gonna slot into the release plan for the Scrum team, and then where roughly do we think it's gonna come out the other end. And so that really helped us make sure that we didn't have people who were saying, oh yeah, well, engineering scoped that as a small item, we'll have that done next week. When, the reality was that we weren't gonna get to it for another 3 months. And so, that helped us be more efficient in terms of our teams working on stuff that was well-defined, as well as then not overcommitting in terms of the customer deliverable. And so, part of what we did to make that happen was we created, this is a scope context diagram for those of you that have done business analyst training or activities, that basically allows you to help really frame your user stories. So again, if you haven't taken a class in terms of how to write good user stories, this is a good context in which to do it in, where you talk about the various players that are operating your system, what are the actions they take and stuff, and it really helps you home in on writing good user stories. But the intent is making sure that you've got good user stories that are given to your team before they start the work, so that you're not spending your time doing that as part of the work. So again now, participation. How have you done efficiency within your organization? So tweet away or grab a mic.
In terms of our company, what we start with at the high level portfolio, once we decide to work on a project, we create the business process model. Underneath there is a kind of solution architecture vision and roadmap, technical visibility, what we're working on, broken down into further epics, and we don't have features, but based on we prioritize epics and the highest priority epics, and those that part of the minimum viable to deploy. They do releases with roadmaps, and for those that are kind of closest releases, they started breaking those epics into stories and size those using affinity sizing, and then the closer story to the iteration, that's when they elaborate more and they have pre-playing sessions where they talk a little bit more about user stories, making sure that developers understand them before they get into the implementation, and they use site discussions to elaborate some more.
Great. You should be up here giving a talk. Excellent. That's great. That's good. Next thing, feeling of purpose, right? So one of the things that's different with Agile, right? For your engineering managers need to change their focus, right? They're no longer the order take or the order giver. The teams are figuring out what they need to do and how they want to be organized. And so one of the things that we focus a lot of our managers on is making sure they focus on motivating people, growing their careers, et cetera. And one of the things that we really focus on, we focus on the 3 core things of motivation. Autonomy, making sure that they have autonomy, making sure they have mastery, i.e. we give them training and they're growing their careers. And then third is a feeling of purpose. And so when we were looking at how do we do this at an Agile perspective, one of the things that we said is, well, the work that's coming into an Agile team needs to be able to map back to high-level business objectives. And so we have, as a company, we have defined, for example, our 2015 objectives, the things that we want to be able to do. And it starts out with some high-level things, but basically it's broken down into like 12 or 15 things we need to get done this year that we want to focus on. And then those then break down into the features that we need to deliver, the projects we need to deliver, the work that we need to have done. And so what we do is we map that all back to those corporate objectives. So this way now, everyone has an understanding of that what they're working on maps back to what the company's trying to do to succeed. They now have autonomy in terms of understanding this and being able to figure out, well, okay, I understand what this business objective is. Now I just got this work item in front of me. Maybe I need to do this differently than what other people were thinking of, but I'm still going to achieve this corporate objective, this business objective. And then it enables us to just keep iterating on improvement as well too, where they're constantly saying, okay, I understand this is the business objective, and this piece is going to be my first step, but I understand where we need to go, so I kind of understand at a high level what my next few steps need to be. So you get, you're on track to the vision, you've got this connection back to what you're working on, and you can constantly be iterating to get there and understand ways in which you can iterate in order to get there, right? Classic example that I like to use is the business objective is cross the river. And the team might decide, I'm gonna build a boat, I'm gonna build a bridge, I'm gonna build a jetpack to carry people across, whatever it is, but they're able to do that based on understanding not only the objective, but what are we trying to accomplish once we get there. And so the thing that we do for that is we actually literally have put in, and so again, this is where we use Asana. So in Asana, we put in our corporate objectives. And when the work item comes into our intake process, we create a business or an architecture epic associated with that, and we connect it back to the corporate objective. So there's a connection of the business and architectural objectives back to the corporate objective. Those then break down into the features that are part of what we're delivering, which then break down to the user stories. So when someone in the organization picks up a user story to work on, they can track it back to the feature that's associated with that, tracking it back to the business objective associated with it, tracking it back to the corporate objective associated with it. So now they've got this understanding of, why am I doing this, right? We as a Scrum team, we just picked up these bunch of user stories. What's going on? How does this fit in with the rest of the company and everything that's going on? And so it helps provide that information for them. And so here's an example. It's really hard to see, but again, this is real live Jira entry. So the Jira entry, so this is the feature that points back to the epics that it's associated with. Right, so in this case, it's pointing back to two things: a business epic and an architectural epic, and so because they're both associated with that particular work item. And then this Jira entry, I don't have it on here, but this Jira entry then has further breakdown to go down to the user stories. And then if you go back to these Jira entries, then they have a connection back to the corporate objective of what we're trying to accomplish there. Yeah, question.
Yeah, if you go back to the previous slide, the important part of Agile is the direct involvement with the customer, with the team doing the development. And so I'm looking at these three levels. Well, certainly I can see the customer involvement at the portfolio level. Is that really you're getting direct input from the customer? It's a little bit trickier at the program level, but I'll go directly to the team level. Okay, if the customer isn't getting involved with the executives at the portfolio level and giving direct input, what provision is there for a direct involvement with the outside customer down there at the team level with each and every one of the teams? It seems to be, in a large, that's sort of the, hey, I worked with digital, down in the team organization, the customer was a figment of someone's imagination. So how do you get actual customer involvement down at that team level?
So the way that we do it, so we have customer involvement at all of these levels, right? So when we go out to a customer, right, they might say, hey, we need you to support. Let me think of an example off the top of my head. We need you to deliver live linear over IP to our customers. And that would be kind of the business epic associated with that, right? We're going to take a live linear feed and we're going to start delivering it over IP to their customers. And then that will then break down to, okay, we now need to talk about where are we getting the live linear feeds from, how are we transcoding it, how are we protecting it, what devices are we delivering it to, are we doing HLS, are we doing HDS, are we doing smooth streaming, all that stuff, right, which will break down into features that we would then go back to the customer and talk about, okay, roughly based on our sprint release plan, we think this is showing up here, this is showing up here, this is showing up here. Do you agree with those priorities? Do you think that's the right order of stuff? Does that kind of fit in? And then, generally now, we then switch to another group of people that we talk to at the customer, right? This is kind of like executive to executive talk. And then we'll start talking to the people who are down in the trenches implementing it and talk about, okay, how do we want to handle error handling if the transcoding fails? How, which devices do you really want to have this support? Which operating systems on those devices do you want to have to support? Do you want the user interface to be adaptive and responsive? And a whole bunch of other things that then become user stories down at this level. And generally what we'll do is down here, we'll do demos with our customer at the end of each sprint. And then up here, we'll do demos at major events with the executives at the customer. So the customer interaction is happening at all levels. It's just different parts of the customers that are aligning with different parts of our organization where it's happening.
So there are grunts in the customer's organization who are interacting with the grunts in Singapore.
Technical experts.
Okay, technical experts.
Yeah.
Have a question here? Right here? Marie?
Hi, just a quick question. I recognize this as the SAFE framework. Have you chosen the SAFE framework? So you're just using this as an illustration?
Yeah, I like this diagram because it breaks it up into the 3 levels, right? In terms of how we've adapted Agile at the Scrum level, the Scrum of Scrums, and the portfolio level. So I like the diagram, I like certain aspects of this, but we have not adopted SAFE in no way, shape, or form. I won't disparage SAFE, but I'll just say that there's a lot involved in it that we don't do and don't want to do.
Thank you.
Looking at the diagram up there, you have Kanban as the portfolio level and then Scrum at the lower level. Can you talk about the difference and how you think it fits in terms of the purposes of the levels?
Yeah, well, so as David mentioned earlier, right? Kanban is a good way of dealing with. You've got this work that's coming into your intake process, and how are you tackling it, right? In terms of understanding, not only are you approving it and where are you prioritizing it and slotting it in, but looking at capacity across your organization to decide whether you're how much of the work can you actually flow into the rest of the system from there, right? We use Scrum at our team levels. We do have one team that does Kanban, and that's our deployment team. That's the team that takes our products and deploys it for our customers, and it's because their work is it's constantly changing, right? New customer says, hey, I want to deploy this product now. We slot it in, and so there's not as much planning in terms of this. So that one team doesn't have this middle layer. Was there
Yes, a question. So why didn't you choose SAFE? Why not?
Let's talk about that afterwards. That's a long conversation,
Yes.
but I promise to answer, just not now. Okay, so again, audience participation. Feeling a purpose at your company. What's your recipe for happiness? How do you keep your employees focused on the right things and feeling that what they're doing is connected to what's going on in the company? By working. All right, so resource planning. So resource planning. So I mentioned this kind of a little bit earlier as well too. As stuff is coming into the intake, we are estimating the cost and estimating the revenue, and then we do track the time and cost later on. Now we hold our people accountable based on order of magnitude, right? So if someone says, oh, it's going to cost us $10,000 and it ended up costing us $15,000, that's a wash, right? We don't care. If they say it's going to cost us $10,000 and it ended up costing us $10 million, then we want to understand what's going on and what happened. Now we track our time and cost for another reason as well too. As an organization, we capitalize our software cost, and some organizations do that, some don't, and so there's a reason for us to be tracking that on a regular basis. Some organizations don't, but basically, the whole idea here is we prioritize based on these factors. We need to make sure that they're legitimate. And then it also helps us as an executive staff understand where are we spending our time and our money, right? In terms of what teams are spending, you know, what cost are we spending on projects for what teams? So we can be looking at this on a regular basis and seeing this on a regular basis. And so again, you know, if your organization is capitalizing your product development costs, you probably have the same thing we do in terms of a need to track that on a regular basis. We use a tool called Tempo, which is a plug-in to Jira to be able to do that. So all of our work flows through Jira, as I mentioned earlier. And so as people pick up these work items and work on them, Tempo makes it really easy for them to just say, I'm starting to work on it, I stopped work on it, click, and they're done. And so there's not extra burden on our engineers for keeping track of that. Yes?
Could you elaborate on the prevents gaming of benefits?
Sure. So basically, you know, again, kind of a little bit of what I talked about earlier. You don't want your product owner saying, you know, this is gonna generate $50 million of revenue and has zero cost in order to get an effort through that he thinks is really important, right? You want it to be legitimate. You want it to be accurate to an order of magnitude, so that you are making good business decisions about what you should be working on, what you shouldn't be working on. And so you know, the whole idea of tracking the actuals against the estimates is to not allow them to game it.
So if I understood you correctly, it's not preventing it, but it's reviewing it after the
Yes,
fact.
that's right. People can game the system for a while, right? They can get away with it for a little while, but they can't get away for it for an extended period of time, right? And it becomes pretty obvious who those people are pretty early on.
Has your organization achieved the nirvana of having people assigned uniquely to one project? And if it hasn't, how do you factor that into your resource planning?
So I don't know if I would consider that nirvana, that we have the resources assigned to a particular project, but yes, we have Scrum teams that are dedicated to a particular product area, and then at times those Scrum teams will change and morph depending on how that product is being used in an overall program or overall release. Or we might have multiple work streams that suddenly have now come together to work. And so our Scrum of Scrum teams end up changing more than our Scrum teams end up changing. So I don't know if I would call that nirvana though, because we still have a ways to go in terms of improvements. And so again, right, you know, it's just a way of, if I said, you know, that the first year revenue was going to be 1.6 million and it was going to cost us $20,000 to do it, is that right or is that wrong? And if we made the bet that was the right thing for us to do, was that the right bet? Did it end up being legitimate or not? And in particular, an area in which we try to focus on this is where we're doing professional services work as well too. So where we're doing stuff where you know, they're paying us to do that work. Again, we want to make sure we're getting revenue for the cost that we're putting in there. So then again, you know, the interactive part of the presentation here. What are people doing in terms of resource planning within their organizations today?
We use t-shirt sizing for the big portfolio level, and we actually, you know, with teams, you get a constant velocity, and you can actually figure out release planning. Even with t-shirt sizes, you can say, all right, this is going to take 10 teams to do this one project. So that's how we end up doing it.
One of the things that I'm just curious about in a lot of the companies I've worked with recently, it's the executives who are, if you will, not prioritizing but wanting everything to be done. And I'm just curious how, I'm sure that at one point in time that occurred for you, and how that change was managed.
Oh, we have never had an issue of priorities changing or executives overbooking capacity. No.
But they want it all.
Yeah, no, and really, it was much worse at our organization before we started doing some of these things, right? Where everything was the top priority. Well, you know, and I would go in and ask, well, which one's more important? Well, no, Steve, they're both important. You got to get them both done, right? And that used to be the mantra of the organization was get it all done, right? And the engineers would joke about that and laugh about that, right? Because it just isn't gonna happen. And finally, what I did was I convinced the organization that someone's making that priority decision. You know, if you don't want to make it at the executive level, someone's making it further down the chain. And so either you want to make sure that we're consistent in terms of the data that everyone's using to make that decision, or you're going to live with the fact that, you know, Bob's going to decide this one's more important, and Joe's going to decide this one's more important, and that might cause a conflict for us. And so you know, that's what we ended up doing with that. We still have issues today, honestly, with capacity and making sure that we're not pushing too much work into the team and understanding when we've over booked the team. And it's because, in a lot of ways, some of these items, generally when we do the high-level estimates, it's coming into the intake, ends up being a lower number than what it ends up actually taking to implement.
Steve, how do you manage the resource planning related to operational support? You know, bug fixes, so to speak, you know, critical or not so critical, versus, you know, do you put them into the Agile teams, or do you have a team to do that, or how's that managed in your organization?
So we let the teams decide how they want to do that, but for the most part, the teams have decided on one of two methods. Either they have decided that they understand their velocity and they take it down a certain percentage to leave a percentage of time to tackle any bugs that come up, or they decided that bugs go into the backlog that becomes part of the sprint plan. So we decide, here's what we're going to tackle in terms of this next sprint, what we're going to work on. I don't know off the top of my head how we're split on that, but I know we've got teams operating in both of those models, and both of them work. As the only requirement, the only curbs that we put up on the road for them is they got to do one or the other, right? They can't ignore bugs, and they can't just try to shove the work in along with everything else they already committed to on the sprint. They've got to do one of the two, and then we let the team decide which one they want to do. Okay, so I got to start moving along here because we're running out of time. So visibility, right? So one of the other things that you really need to make sure is that you're all working from a single source of truth, right? So everyone's trying to do Agile. Everyone talks about, well, we're Scrum, but, and so there's some exception that they end up doing, and those exceptions generally lead to having a diverse set of projects. And so you've got all of these projects that are running around going around through there. You need to have some consistency across it, and generally the consistency that you want to have is that you're all working from the single source of truth. And this was a big challenge for us. When we first started doing it, Agile, at the portfolio level, we still had product owners that were creating roadmaps in PowerPoint. They would have their Excel spreadsheets, they would have their PowerPoints, and that's where the roadmaps would be. And then we'd be sitting there trying to map that back to, well, what's over here in Jira in terms of the business epics and the features and the user stories. And sometimes it was an easy connection, sometimes it wasn't. And so we had to break them of the habit of doing that to make sure that everything was in either Asana or Jira, and that they were generating the roadmaps from those two systems whenever they were putting in a PowerPoint for the customer. And that way it was a single source of truth for everyone to understand what is the roadmap, what are we working on. It also then became a single source of truth for the project status. So everyone would understand where we were and what was going on with it. And became an easy way for us to then provide reporting as well too. And so there are dashboards that we can generate from the various projects, and I've got an example of that where you can actually go in and look at PowerPlay is our product name for our Watch TV product. But basically, ignore this. I don't want to see this coming through roadmap. But basically, you could go in and look at the roadmap, and from the roadmap, you could see that hey, everything's looking good for Q4. We got some projects that are in trouble here in terms of risk items for Q1, and then look, Q2 is a mess. And so everyone's now on the same page in terms of what's the roadmap, what's the status of everything that's going on. The reporting is all consistent from it, and so everyone's exactly on the same page. It gives the executives the visibility into what's going on from a corporate perspective, but it's all coming from data that the Scrum teams are working on. So everyone's aligned in terms of where we are with that. Yeah, question?
Just a comment. It looks like when you're coloring them, open is red always, green is testing, and blue is in progress. And in terms of, that would explain in my mind why QQ is in such trouble, because everything's still open. And
Yeah. So yeah, it just so happens that that's the way it's working out here, right? In terms of what's going on, right? So yes, open our testing and in progress are shaded blue all the time. But open can be either green or blue, depending on how we're doing in terms of understanding the user stories, understanding the resourcing against it, or it could be red because it's in trouble. So there are there's different shadings of color for each of the entries as well too. It just so happens that that's the way it came out here. Sorry about that. Bad example.
Okay. Question here?
Yeah.
If things are transparent like that, there's the one archetypical mistake executives may use. How do you avoid using transparent dashboards and things like that to performance evaluate teams, or even worse, individuals? How do you avoid doing that at Synacor, or you fall into that trap?
Yeah, so the individual one is the easier one because everything that's being reported is being reported at the Scrum level. And the only thing that we actually really look at in terms of an individual level is we look at quality, right? So we keep track of bugs and buggy areas and stuff to help us hone in on, do we have an issue with a particular engineer who's not, not doing what they should be doing from a quality perspective. But everything else is team perspective, and it's up to the team to figure out how can we improve efficiency. Is it people, is it processes, is it technology, and really make recommendations based on that. Transparent at the executive level is a lot harder. It's a lot harder because the executives will look at, hey, this team is constantly late in terms of their deliveries. Things move from sprint to sprint. Things move from release to release, and rightly so. I think they start pointing out, here are some of the areas. What's the reason? And the reason might be, yeah, that team is not very good and we've got to fix it. Or the reason might be, hey, the work coming into the team kept getting scope kept changing. Or they kept getting, or new higher priority user stories kept getting interjected to them. So, the executives are going to look at it and they're going to question it. The thing is what's the reason, right? Digging into the reason is what you have to do to understand whether there should be something there to fix or not fix. All right, so visibility at your company. How do people do visibility? How do you keep your executives up to date with what's going on with your Scrum teams?
So we have a group of people that we call the Triad also, but it's not sales, it's product management, the software side, the engineering side, and the project management people, Scrum Masters, etc. So we meet on a regular basis. Now this is something that we've just started a couple of weeks ago, and we're having trouble gelling as a team because we all, as you're saying, even between product management and engineering, we're talking very different languages. But we're kind of combining, it's sort of like a Scrum of Scrums, but it's more at a process level and blockers level than, getting the work done. And so far, it's been working out. And we, once a month, that team also participates in the meeting with the next level up managers and report on where we're at. And again, this is brand new, but it seems to be helping visibility.
Great. Right in the back.
So the way we do it is we have operational reviews every 6 weeks. And I'm the technical manager, and so what happens is we use Rally instead of Jira. We used to use Jira, people now use Rally. And on a weekly basis, my team on different projects will do service reviews. In other words, you look at what have you done well and what hasn't gone well. like what are your blockers, what are the reasons for the blockers, and on a weekly basis try to take some metrics. And then, let's say I have 4 projects, and then at the end of 6 weeks, and we do this every week, and the team runs it. And occasionally I look at it and see how it's going, and at the 6th or 5th week, I sit together with them. And on the 6th week, all the managers will then share it with their sense. And that's, we just started, it seems like it's working.
Yeah, and when you do that, so Rally is your single source of truth then? Yeah, yeah, so when we were at Sea Change, we used Rally. And when I came to Synacor, we did an evaluation of do we want to use Rally or what was called Greenhopper at that point, Jira for Agile now. And the team decided to go with Jira for Agile. You know, either one of them I think are good tools to help you understand what's going on from that perspective.
So we use neither Jira nor Rally. We use Rational Team Concert, which is our DCIM product, and it's a single source of truth. We use dashboards. We created dashboards with burn-down charts and release plans and all kinds of information. And everyone, executives and team members, and everyone has access to it. It's real time. At any point in time, they can go in and check it out. And teams use that information for their retrospectives, reviews, management for their hour frequency, weekly, monthly meetings.
It's great, yeah. And you know, there's a wide range of tools that are out there that are really good for this. And really, you know, one of the things that I preach in my Executive for Agile's presentation is that don't rely on your tools, right? Tools can be good and they can really help, but you can do everything without the tools as well too. It just might mean a little more work. Smaller companies might make more sense, but the key is just making sure that you do whatever the tool will give you.
Because I was going to say, actually, it's a really interesting question when you say, what do you mean by visibility? Because being able to have so we internally, we do our own weekly demos of what the teams have actually done. So it's that actually seeing that incremental improvement over time. What's happening, what's going on, it gives everybody in the organization a chance to know what's happening. And then we record it so if you can't make that particular time, folks can go later, because I know that's always a trouble when you have geographically distributed teams.
Yeah, and for me, right, even for me as the head of engineering, I like to try to make as many demos as I can, but with 15 Scrum teams that are sometimes aligned in terms of how they're sprinting, suddenly on Friday, you've got, 7 overlapping meetings you're trying to go to, and it becomes really difficult. Whereas if I can go into Jira and take a look at the dashboard on a regular basis, I can understand how we're doing. And to be honest, right, I'll go in and look at it and say, well, this team seems to be in trouble. I'm going to go to that demo because I want to hear what they're going to say at the retrospective as well too. All right. Yeah.
I like what Sean said. I have 2. One that I thought was terrible, one that I thought was good. The one that I thought was terrible was we had a portfolio alignment wall that just get longer and longer and longer, covered with tons and tons of stickies, where we spent lots and lots of time, and it reminded me of a Gantt chart, and I thought that was a terrible idea, but that's one of the things that was done in one of my assignments. And another one, which I actually didn't use, but I saw out of one of the Agile Games events that I thought was just a wonderful idea, was they, something like what Sean was saying, is they had somebody with a video camera who'd go around and they would have like the SBN, sport class, what was new here, this whatever, and they would make these really cool little videos that they shared with the executives by emails and whatever, and it was, they had a log of it, and it was a lot of fun, and people got to talk about what really was important, like an SBN sports type show. And I thought, oh, what a good idea of how to do it.
That's a great idea. I love that idea. So forecast, right? Your Scrum teams tend to be hyper-focused on the current sprint and worrying about what's going on with the current sprint. You really have to make sure that you've got someone who's focusing on the horizon that's coming up for your Scrum teams. And so we call that release planning. So we have our Scrum Masters, or our Chief Scrum Masters, who are looking at the next few sprints, what are going to be in them. And then more importantly, what we try to do is on a regular basis take a look at what do we think are the resources we're going to need to be able to execute on that stuff coming on, because then it gives me insight into, okay, this team needs more resources. And hence I now need to go start planning to get more resources, because it might mean I've got to hire people, which is going to take time, or it might mean I got to pull in contractors and we got to get up to speed, which is going to take time. So we really, it helps give predictability into do we need to adjust what we think this team is able to pull off, or do we need to adjust the capacity on it and plan for the head count? So it really helps you to get a better understanding of predictability around the teams, of whether they're going to be delivering it or not delivering it, and then understanding what levers you can pull as an executive to help them deliver it, right? Either reduce scope or increase team capacity if it's possible. And so on a regular basis, we'll do things like this, right? Where here I did a good job of obscuring the features so you guys can't see it, but we'll plan out. And this can be, you could do this with story points, you could do this with estimates, whatever it is that your team's actually doing. But basically, they take a rough swag at what do they think they're going to tackle when, what is it that they think it's going to be, and then you total it up in terms of what your total is, match it up against your team capacity, and now you understand, are you in trouble or are you not in trouble? And that way you can help, really help the team understand. We just did this recently with one of our projects and realized that some contractors that we had on board whose time was coming up, we needed to extend them. And so we decided that we're going to spend the money and extend them for another 3 months to help us get over some of the work that we need that team to accomplish. And so that's really important as well too. In the interest of time, I'm not going to ask for how you're doing forecasts of your company, but this was my favorite graphic of the slide, just given our winter here. I thought that this was a great thing to throw in there. But with that, just real quick, then I want to wrap up and say that I think if you focus in on these 6 areas, and they're all intertwined in one shape or another, but if you really focus on these 6 areas, I think you can really help get things connected more between your executives and your Scrum teams. And that's going to benefit everybody all around. Your executives are going to feel better about the organization running in an Agile fashion. Your Agile teams are going to feel better about what they're doing. And to be honest, it's going to stop your executives from going in and mucking things up, right? One of the biggest problems as an executive is that your time frame for influence is far out. It's 9 months, it's 12 months, it's 18 months in terms of things that you're putting in place now that are going to come and you're going to see the benefits of. And so as executives, we kind of feel like, what did I accomplish today? And so sometimes you want to just go in and muck around with a team to say that you accomplished something today. You think you're doing good by mucking around with them, but you're not. And these types of strategies, types of actions can really help prevent that. So with that, I'll just open it up to see any final questions.
Just talking about that person on the bridge on the last slide. I'm assuming that person's within your organization. Where do they sit? What kind of skill sets do they have? What kind of skills work best for that kind of role?
So the person that we had that was doing that originally was in our product management organization. But he was a product manager who had a really excellent mix of product knowledge about what our products were and their capabilities, engineering knowledge in terms of technical knowledge about the architecture of the product, and then he really had good business sense as well too. So he was, he was the ideal candidate to help bring this all together for us because he had that nice mix of all 3 of those areas, and he has since moved into an organization that's looking more overall at ways in which we can be improving the organization. But with that mixture, he was the obvious choice for the person to lead and drive that for us. And I think it needs to be someone, literally. I mean, it's not so much that you're bridging product ownership and Agile teams, right? That's happening within the team level. It's more of you are bridging the business side versus the execution side. And to have someone who understands both of those. Well, the other thing, I don't know if I mentioned this, but he came from a program management background as well, to a Chief Scrum Master background. So, great mixture of skills to help kind of bridge the gap there for us.
With your forecasting and resource planning, setting your corporate objectives, matching your objectives through the resources you have available, how do you live the Agile value of embracing change?
Yeah, so because we're not doing it that far out, we are able to adjust it. right? So you know, the objectives for the year are set at the beginning in terms of what we want to accomplish, and we revisit those on a weekly basis. Do they need to be adjusted? You know, do the KPIs need to be adjusted? Does the time frame need to be adjusted? So it's a regular change in terms of that stuff. But then in terms of everything else that we're doing, we're looking at that on a regular basis, and it's changing on a regular basis. You know, we might decide that for the next few months, this team isn't working on stuff that's important as what this team's working on, and if we can, if they've got the right skill set, we'll move things around. We'll create a new Scrum of Scrums that includes new Scrum teams and work streams. So it's constantly in flux and constantly changing. The thing that we try not to change that much is the priorities. Because that's really what messes up your teams, is when they never get anything done because you're constantly changing what you want them to work on. We try to help them, we try to make sure that that stuff stays constant enough that they can finish it, and then introduce change.
I'm interested in understanding a little more about the guy on the bridge. What sort of authority did he have? Where did he report? What could he do if he saw disconnects?
So he reported to the head of product management, so the chief guy who's defining our product strategy. And if he saw a disconnect there, then he would report up to him. But he was the type of individual that didn't really care about hierarchy and reporting structure. He actually worked for me for a while before he took on that role, and so we had a relationship, and he felt comfortable coming to me and saying, "Steve, your Scrum teams are screwing up, fix it." Or hey, you know, there's this issue, we need to figure out how we're gonna work it. So he was comfortable going across any of, you know, product management, sales, engineering, and even going to the CEO if he needed to in order to raise an issue up and make sure that we were addressing it and that we were making change to address it. So, you know, he had I wouldn't say he officially had a lot of authority, but he acted as if he did. Right, which is what you want from someone in this role, right? Someone who feels like, you know, I'm invested enough to make sure that things are working well, to make sure we're doing the right thing for the company.
Was that his full-time job?
Yes, absolutely, right? Which is why I specifically put the guy on the bridge, right, in terms of the graphic, because I think you do need someone who's focusing on that.
In the chart that you showed when you had sprints and the various features, how you tested the reliability of those forecasts, and how have you done it?
We didn't test the reliability of it that much, right? I mean, we look at it on a regular basis in terms of if they said that, you know, we needed this capacity to get these features done in this sprint, and they had that capacity, did they get all those features done or not? And then like I was saying earlier, if they didn't, why, right? Was it because resources didn't come in time? Was it because the scope of the work changed? Was it because we really didn't understand this feature that well? So it's just a constant conversation in the retrospective of you know, if we didn't get everything done this sprint that we thought we were going to get done, why? And what do we want to try to do differently next time? And so it just is something we're just doing constantly.
So what are the metrics you collected at the team level, program level, and the portfolio level? And was it all visible to everyone? And how did you kind of reorient based on the metrics?
So at the portfolio level, the big metric for us is are we achieving our corporate initiatives, right? Our corporate goals that we put in place, and those were good, smart goals in terms of they were very specific and measurable. You know, there was time associated with it, and so at that level, that was the key thing. At the program level, the thing that we're really tracking is a little bit harder, but it's basically, are we winning in that business space, and are our customers happy with what we're doing? And at the Scrum team level, the big thing that we're focusing on is are they, well, I shouldn't say the big thing we're focusing on. We focus on a bunch of things, from the quality of what they're delivering to the risk that we're taking, because we like them to take risks. We like them to experiment, because, you know, if you're not experimenting, you're never going to figure out how to improve. So there's a bunch of different things that we'll look at the various Scrum teams in terms of metrics that we'll associate. But one of the things that we don't do is we don't look at velocity. That's a KPI that we don't measure, because it's too easy to gain, And it's, and we really want to entice them to experiment. And when you experiment, your velocity will become, it'll fluctuate a lot, right? You know, for me, the sign of a team that's not experimenting is someone who's got a solid velocity that's staying consistent across everything they're doing. And so we try not to introduce metrics or KPIs that are going to drive the wrong behavior than what we're looking for. Okay, and I'll stop talking.
Thank you, Steve. So my code has a real simple way to prevent people comparing velocity. He said, do your story point estimates in the billions. Because your managers after work are going to go to the local bar and they're going to compare their teams and they're going to brag that my team completed 5 billion story points. So, some of the ways.